The two officers on my porch looked awkward, shifting from one foot to the other like people who'd rather be anywhere else. Behind them, a woman with a severe tight bun and oversized designer sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown was waving her arms, her voice carrying across the front yard. "I want him arrested for trespassing," she shrieked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. "He harassed my guests on community property." I kept my cool and reached for the folder I'd prepared for exactly this sort of emergency. "Officers, I have some documents you may want to see," I said in a steady voice, handing over the guest list, printed screenshots from my security cameras, and certified copies of my property deed. The younger officer flipped through the papers while his partner watched the woman continue her dramatic display. After a beat, he looked up at me and then back at her. "Ma'am," he said slowly, as if addressing a child, "these people aren't your guests. They're trespassing on private property." Her expression alone was worth the trouble. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I bit down to stop a smile from escaping. This was the instant I'd been waiting for. The second HOA President Brenda Garrison realized she'd picked on the wrong neighbor. But let me rewind and tell you how we reached this point. 6 months earlier, I had moved into what I believed would be my perfect house in Sunset Ridge. The lot included a private dock on Crystal Lake and a generous backyard that backed up to the community park. My realtor had been explicit about the boundaries, pointing out exactly where my land ended and the HOA-maintained area began. What she didn't mention was Brenda Garrison, the self-appointed sovereign of our sweet little subdivision. Brenda, at 5'2" with peroxide blonde hair and a wardrobe that screamed, "I peaked in high school," governed the HOA like a monarch. Her iron fist hidden beneath passive-aggressive smiles and thinly veiled threats. My first run-in with her happened 2 weeks after I moved in. I was cramming boxes into the garage when she strode up my driveway holding a clipboard. "You must be the new resident," she announced, skipping any kind of greeting. "I'm Brenda Garrison, HOA president. I need to inform you." What followed was 20 minutes of rules about grass height, approved mailbox colors, and the correct way to hang holiday decorations. I nodded through it, figuring it was wiser to be polite. That was my first slip-up. The real trouble began roughly 2 months later. I arrived home from a business trip one Saturday to find my backyard transformed into a full-blown party zone. At least 30 people lounged on my deck chairs, used my grill, and a speaker system blared near the shed. Empty beer cans dotted my otherwise pristine lawn, and string lights had been hung between trees. For a stunned moment, I wondered if I'd somehow forgotten how to throw a party. Then I saw Brenda presiding by the dock, entertaining a cluster of women with what sounded like gossip about another neighbor's divorce. "Excuse me," I called, trying to keep my voice even. "What's happening here?" Brenda turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're back. Don't worry. We're just using the overflow area for my annual summer social. The community pavilion is crowded. This isn't an overflow area," I said, feeling my patience wear thin. "This is private property." Her laugh scraped along my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "This area has always been used for community events." The previous owner never minded. I inhaled and reminded myself to stay civil. Well, I do mind. "I need everyone to leave now." The next few minutes dissolved into chaos. A few guests, embarrassed, began collecting their things and skedaddling. Others, fortified by Brenda's outraged protests, insisted they'd been told this was communal land. One aggressively belligerent man, Dale, insisted Brenda had declared the dock HOA property. "She said we could use it any time," Dale slurred, several beers past coherent thought. "You can't kick us out of community space." I pulled out my phone and displayed a photo of my deed. "This shows exactly where my property line is," I said. "You're about 50 feet inside it." More people started to drift away, but Brenda's face flushed an alarming shade of crimson. "This is harassment!" she shrieked. "You're humiliating me in front of the whole neighborhood. I'm reporting this to the HOA board." "Please do," I answered coolly. "And while you're at it, report that you've been trespassing on private property and inviting others to do the same." She stormed off with her remaining acolytes trailing behind like ducklings. I spent the next 2 hours picking up their trash, taking photos, and recording videos. A small voice in my head warned me this wouldn't be the end. It turned out to be right. The following Monday, an official-looking letter arrived from the HOA summoning me to a disciplinary hearing for conduct unbecoming of a community member and harassment of fellow residents. The letter was signed, predictably, by Brenda. Naturally, I did my homework. I scoured the HOA bylaws, examined the community map, and hired a surveyor to verify my property lines. Everything corroborated what I already knew. My backyard and dock lay squarely on my private lot. I also installed security cameras to cover every inch. Maybe it was paranoia, but I suspected Brenda wouldn't simply let this go. The HOA hearing was a circus. Brenda filled the room with friends who shot me icy stares as I walked in. She delivered her accusations with the theatrics of a prosecutor, claiming I'd viciously evicted her guests and threatened lifelong residents. When my turn came, I presented my evidence, the deed, the surveyor's report, and photographs showing the party mess. You could see the board members wince when I pointed out that Brenda had never asked permission to use my land. "This is preposterous," Brenda exploded. "We've always used that area. It's tradition." "Tradition doesn't supersede property law," I replied. "Trespassing is trespassing, no matter how long it's been tolerated." The board ultimately sided with me, but Brenda's look told me vengeance had taken root. She resembled someone plotting retaliation, and I resolved to be vigilant. For several weeks, things were quiet, unnaturally quiet. Then one Thursday night altered everything. I was working late in my home office when I heard voices out back. I checked my security camera and saw 5 people unloading coolers and chairs at the dock. I recognized Dale from the prior incident. They acted as if they owned the place. I grabbed my phone and went outside. "Gentlemen," I called, "you need to leave. This is private property." Dale turned toward me with a smirk. "Brenda said we could use the dock for our fishing club meeting. She's the HOA president, so she has authority." "She doesn't," I said flatly. "This is my property. Leave now or I'll call the police." "Go ahead," Dale shot back. "No, Brenda's already called. Said you've been harassing HOA members." That's when sirens cut through the night. 2 police cars pulled into my driveway and officers strode toward the house, faces set. Brenda appeared in a flurry, practically running in her designer heels. "Officers, thank God you're here," she wailed, turning the scene into performance art. "This man has been terrorizing our community, threatening people and creating a hostile environment. And that drops us back at the moment." I calmly handed over the documentation while Brenda's scheme began to implode. The senior officer, a no-nonsense woman named Officer Patterson, reviewed my security footage on my phone. It plainly showed the men entering my property without permission and me asking them to leave. She then examined the property records and the HOA bylaws I'd printed. "Mrs. Garrison," Officer Patterson said in a stern voice, "not only were these people trespassing, but you appear to have made a false police report. That's a serious offense." Color drained from Brenda's face. "But I'm the HOA president. My authority covers community spaces." "Ma'am, HOA authority doesn't extend to private property," the officer replied, hiding her frustration. "Filing a false 911 report is a crime. We could arrest you right now." I watched Brenda's confident facade crumble. The men she'd sent were being cited for trespassing, and Dale was being prepped for a field sobriety test he clearly wouldn't pass. Officer Patterson continued, "Since no physical harm occurred, we'll issue a warning this time. But if you call us here again with false claims, you'll be arrested. Do you understand?" Brenda nodded. Her bravado evaporated. As the police packed up, Officer Patterson pulled me aside. "You might want to consider a restraining order," she advised quietly. "People like her don't always stop." I thanked her, but I had a different strategy. Brenda had made a catastrophic mistake. She'd roped law enforcement into her petty war. That meant there was now an official paper trail documenting her behavior, and I intended to use it over the next week. I organized everything: records of trespassing, the false police report, and her abuse of HOA powers. I even dug up evidence that Brenda had been using HOA funds to purchase supplies for events that were really just private parties. I gathered receipts, invoices, and witness statements exposing a pattern. Brenda repeatedly classified private gatherings as community events and funneled HOA funds toward supplies for them. I requested archived HOA minutes and found vague entries about reimbursements and event approvals that raised red flags. With everything neatly organized, I drafted a formal complaint for the HOA board and assembled a packet for the county records office. I reached out to an attorney to confirm the legal steps and guidance soon. She had been billing the HOA for everything: food, decorations, even alcohol, that she'd been using for her own private gatherings. It was the final puzzle piece that tied all of Brenda's arrogance together. I decided to reach out to some of my neighbors, and what I learned painted a far uglier picture than I'd expected. Tom, who lived 2 streets over, told me Brenda had once fined him $500 because his grass was 1/4 of an inch too tall. Then there was Sarah from the next block, a single mother caring for her elderly mom. Brenda had tried to force her to remove a wheelchair ramp, saying it wasn't aesthetically approved, even though Sarah had provided medical documentation proving it was necessary for her mother's mobility. One by one, the stories poured in. Everyone had a Brenda story. She had ruled through fear, bullying homeowners with fines, threats, and selective enforcement of petty rules. But now the tides were turning. People were no longer afraid. They were angry, and they were ready to act. I contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in HOA law and showed him my growing pile of evidence: the trespassing incidents, the false police report, the misused HOA funds, and the written testimonies of residents who had been harassed. He flipped through the stack and gave me a satisfied nod. "We have more than enough," he said. "The false police report alone is grounds for immediate removal under your HOA bylaws." We decided to strike at the next HOA meeting. I quietly reached out to everyone who had shared their stories and told them what we were planning. Word spread fast through the neighborhood grapevine. By the time the meeting rolled around, the community center was packed, standing room only, something that hadn't happened in years. Brenda, as always, arrived late, clearly expecting another dull meeting where she could boss people around and rubber stamp her own agenda. The moment she saw the crowd, her expression flickered, a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Well," she said with a forced smile as she strutted to the front. "What a wonderful turnout. I suppose everyone's eager to hear about the new landscape requirements I'm proposing." I stood up, holding a thick folder of papers. "Actually," I said, "I think there's a far more urgent matter we need to address: the conduct of our current HOA president." The room fell silent. Brenda froze mid-smile. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "That's not on the agenda." I flipped open my notes. According to Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws, any member can raise a motion for board review if it pertains to potential misconduct by board members. Her eyes narrowed. "And what misconduct are you alleging?" That was my cue. I opened the folder and began laying out the evidence piece by piece. The false police report, complete with the official case number and Officer Patterson's notes. The financial records show misused HOA funds for community events that were actually private parties. And finally, the signed witness statements from Tom, Sarah, and 6 other neighbors describing Brenda's intimidation and abuse of authority. As I spoke, I could see the board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked shocked. Others looked like they'd known parts of it but never dared to act. "This is outrageous," Brenda snapped, her voice rising. "Character assassination. These are all lies and misunderstandings." "Is it a misunderstanding," I asked evenly, "that you filed a false police report?" "Because I have the officer's body cam footage right here if anyone would like to see it." The room erupted in whispers. Several neighbors immediately called out, "Play it!" I connected my laptop to the projector and hit play. The footage showed Brenda telling the officers I had harassed residents, followed by Officer Patterson calmly, reviewing my evidence and warning Brenda that filing false reports was a crime. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. Brenda's face had turned purple, her breathing uneven. "I'd like to make a motion," said Robert Daniels, the HOA treasurer, his voice steady. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in our current president." Seconded. came at least 5 voices from the crowd. "You can't do this!" Brenda shrieked, her composure gone. "I've been president for 8 years. Without me, property values will crash. The neighborhood will fall apart." Robert ignored her tantrum. All in favor of removing Brenda Garrison as HOA president? Hands shot up across the room. I did a quick count, at least 40 of the 50 people present. All opposed? Only 3 hands went up, Brenda's and her 2 loyal followers. "The motion passes," Robert declared. Effective immediately, Brenda Garrison is removed as HOA president. What happened next was chaos, the kind you can't make up. Brenda leaped to her feet so quickly her chair clattered to the floor. She grabbed the gavel she'd treated like a royal scepter for years and hurled it across the room, missing poor Mrs. Chen's head by inches. "You'll all regret this," she screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'll sue every last one of you!" "You think you've won? This isn't over!" She stormed toward the exit, but in her rage, she slammed straight into the glass panel beside the door. Her designer sunglasses went flying and she stumbled backward, dazed. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tom, ever the gentleman, stepped forward to help her up. She slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "None of you deserves my leadership. This place will be a dump within 6 months without me." Finally, she found the actual door and stormed out, leaving behind a room full of stunned neighbors. Then someone began to clap. Slowly, the entire room joined in, the applause growing into cheers and laughter. Robert quickly regained control of the meeting. He announced that a special election would be held in 2 weeks to choose a new president and that he would serve as interim president in the meantime. His first act? Voiding every fine Brenda had issued in the past 6 months and ordering a full audit of HOA finances. 2 weeks later, the community elected Margaret Stone as the new president. Margaret was everything Brenda wasn't: calm, reasonable, and genuinely invested in improving the neighborhood rather than controlling it. Her first initiative was to clearly mark all boundaries between private and HOA property and to approve a fence installation between my yard and the community park. The motion passed unanimously. The ultimate humiliation for Brenda came when the audit revealed she had embezzled nearly $3,000 in HOA funds for personal expenses. The new board sent her a certified demand letter requiring repayment within 30 days or face legal action. She paid, but not before sending a long, bitter email to the entire HOA list accusing everyone of betrayal. Robert promptly removed her from the email group. These days, peace has returned to Sunset Ridge. My backyard is quiet again, and the new fence, lined with blooming climbing roses, adds a touch of beauty and privacy to my property. Brenda still lives here, but she keeps to herself. Occasionally, I see her walking her bedazzled Yorkshire Terrier around the lake, forced to take the long public path that adds an extra half-mile to her route. She passes my dock without looking, her posture rigid with unspoken bitterness. The best part came last month when I hosted a completely legal HOA-approved barbecue. As Brenda power walked past, one of my guests called out cheerfully, "Hey, Brenda! Want to join us?" She sped up, pretending not to hear, while her little dog barked indignantly in our direction. It was perfect. But the final twist came soon after. The completed audit revealed Brenda had been misusing HOA funds for years, thousands more than anyone knew. The board filed criminal charges for embezzlement, and a few months later, she was convicted of misdemeanor theft. The judge ordered her to repay $15,000 in misappropriated funds and complete 200 hours of community service. The image of Brenda, once the self-proclaimed queen of Sunset Ridge, now picking up trash in the very park she used to lord over, that was true justice.